I want to welcome you to what is today? The 12th,
Yeah.
the June 12th Budget Information Session. And we can just go ahead and get started. So we're going to start with solid waste.
Yep, Commissioner, so this is day 4 of our 6 days of budget meetings, and we've modified the schedule. So if you look on your agenda, we've modified the schedule based upon the ones we were able to advance last week. So again, today we're going to be tackling solid waste, parks and conservation resources, Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the airport. So we'll start off with the solid waste. So,
Chris, if you want to make introductions.
Turning your mic on.
There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this morning we do have Director Paul Sacco and Section Manager Cassie Hartman, good partners from Solid Waste. We have John Wagner, almost said the wrong John there, John Wagner from OMB and James Lewis from OMB. Remember, this is an enterprise department, so we will be presenting the capital. James will be presenting the capital right along with our operating presentation. So with that, John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris. John Wagner, Office of Management Budget. I am the operating analyst for solid waste. And good morning, commissioners, Madam Chairwoman. I'm going to try to make this budget as easy as 1, 2, 3. So solid waste has 1 staff. It has 2 entities. That's the Solid Waste Department and the Lealman Municipal Service Benefit Unit, and 3 funds: Solid Waste Revenue and Operating, Solid Waste Renewal and Replacement, or the Capital Fund, and the Lealman Solid Waste Collection and Disposal Fund. The presentation organization, as Chris mentioned, I will start with operating. I'll pass it to James Lewis for capital. Paul Sacco will present the department portion, and then we'll circle back to Lealman for the final closing part. So on the top of page 2 of your package, we're going to be finding efficiencies inside and out. Beginning in FY23, improved internal processes at the industrial waste treatment facility saved the department $150,000. Continuing in FY24, a maintenance outsourcing pilot program reduced personnel services cost $149,000. And finally, for FY25, the department submitted $468,000 in cost savings by using external vendors for water quality testing and internal staff adjustments, and the staff adjustments saved $119,000. Moving to the middle of page 2, our topics of discussion fall into a now state, a near state, and an administrative state. So the now state focuses on cost, specifically at the waste to energy facility operating cost. The current waste to energy facility operator, the contract was extended through December 2025, while RFQs and RFPs are sought and evaluated. As a result, the waste to energy contract cost increased $10.5 million, and that's because the contract extension per ton of waste process increased 46%. The RFQ should be completed the RFQ for a new operator should be completed between June and October of 2024, and RFP selection is expected by June of 2025. Moving on, the near state focuses on 2 primary revenue streams. First, the current Duke Energy Power Purchase Agreement, or PPA, expires in December 2024, resulting in a revenue decrease of $51.8 million. While a standard PPA is available from Duke Energy, brokering electricity on the open market is an alternative. Accurate revenue projections aren't available without a contract in place, and my preliminary power brokering market research agrees with the Solid Waste Department preliminary research. The second revenue in the near state involves tipping fees, and those tipping fees must ultimately replace the lost electricity revenue. A rate study is planned for the second quarter of FY25, and that will determine the timing and amount of fee increases. For example, the current strategy is a small annual increase until revenues and expenditures reach equilibrium. Reserves are a strategic resource used to fund revenue gaps while the tipping fees stabilize. The recommendations of the study will be presented to the board for adoption, and FY25 is the third and final 6.8 annual percentage increase from the adopted 23. So those rate increases of 6.8 for tipping fees went from 23, 24, and 25. Onto the administrative state. It describes a more restrictive EPA rules for the waste-to-energy facility emissions, which could take effect as early as December 2020. Oh, I was right, November 2024. If these are enacted, the required capital equipment investments could cost $50 to $200 million in the time period 3 to 5 years after adoption. Along with those stricter standards, the annual operating costs could increase between $8 and $9 million. At the top of page 3, we'll look at budget drivers. The first fund is revenue and operating. The FY25 budget, excluding reserves, increased $11.9 million. Revenues decreased $51.9 million. Personnel services increased $25,000, including a 3% salary adjustment on the midpoint for all employees, and Florida retirement system increases. The department FTE decreases 2, and operating expenses increased $12 million. And the primary drivers are contract services at $10.6 million, general consulting, and operating supplies those are roughly $300 to $400 million. Reserves increased $5.5 million to $297.4 million. The renewal and replacement or capital fund, the FY25 budget, excluding reserves and transfers, decreases $3.5 million. Revenues remain flat at $30 million, and those are transferred from the solid waste revenue and operating fund. Reserves increased $17.5 million, and that is the operating portion of solid waste. I'll turn it over to James Lewis for the capital portion.
Thank you, John. Good morning, Chair Peters and Commissioners. I'm James Lewis, a capital budget analyst from the Office of Management and Budget. So on the bottom of page 3 here, you'll see the capital improvement plan report. The FY25 through 30 6-year CIP for solid waste is supported by one fund, the Solid Waste Renewal and Replacement Fund. For the 6-year plan, we are seeing an increase over the current FY24 through 29 CIP. That is almost entirely driven by new projects that are being requested by solid waste for FY25. Particularly, there are 3 new projects for rehab and replacement at the waste-to-energy facility. And I will be returning to those in just a minute to explain them a little more thoroughly, but they're driving a lot of the increase in the 6-year plan. Looking at FY25, and again, in the 6-year plan, only the first year is actually adopted for allocation. So FY25, we are seeing a decrease of $3.5 million, or 12.4%. The FY25 request for capital improvements is $24.5 million, and it's about $5 million more than the average expenditure over the previous 6 years. So if you look at FY25 and you were to take out those new projects that solid waste is requesting, we actually see a decrease of what would have been $10.8 million. And I point that out just to say that solid waste has really right-sized or scaled their capital plan for FY25 to come into alignment with what we've seen and observed historical trends and forecasts of what's actually going to occur in their capital improvements over the next year and the next 6 years.
Commissioners, all the capital is listed on page 14, 15, and 16 in your packet, just so you know, if you want to follow along.
Thank you. All right, so the CIP increased funding requests, and again, this is something we do for any project that's increasing by $250,000 and 15%, and we use both of those criteria to really ensure that we're calling out projects that are increasing not just in size by dollars, but also in proportion to the scope and the cost of the project. Solid Waste has 2 additional funding requests this year. This includes the Industrial Waste Treatment Facility project, which is a parent project, and we have extended that funding out through the 12-year forecast through FY36. So this previously was not budgeted that far out. It was only budgeted for a couple of years. But as a parent project, it's going to address continual upgrades and improvements at the Industrial Waste Treatment Facility. So in our system, we're able to forecast out that far, and we've gone ahead and done that this year. It also includes the Recycling Center expansion projects, which is another parent project that we've extended out for a few years as we've identified some additional child or sub-projects that'll be done under that parent. All right, now at the top of page 4, we have the solid waste new project request for FY25. And so the first 3 bullets here are your 3 new replacement and rehabilitation projects at the waste to energy facility. And these include boiler pressure parts, stoker grate replacements, and some miscellaneous improvements. So this does not include any of the improvements that would be needed to comply with the proposed EPA rules that John mentioned earlier. This is essentially the next iteration of the TRP, the Technical Recovery Program, which you may remember. It's going to be structured a little bit differently than it was in the past, and this is related to the RFQ, RFP that John was talking about for the operator at the waste to energy facility. And Paul could speak in a little more detail about how they're going to structure that contract to have greater oversight and participation in the capital projects at that facility. But on the budgetary side, we're actually budgeting and allocating dollars within these projects to each specific work item that they'll be doing under this agreement. So that report that starts on page 14, the kind of the capital detail report, the actual budget, at the end of that report, you'll see these new projects, and a little lengthy, but it has listed out kind of like individual line items that address the actual, boiler that they're going to be working on, the actual stoker they're going to be working on, etc. All total, that comes to about $248 million through the 12-year forecast through FY36. Looking back at the TRP, the kind of the last iteration of this that was done under the previous agreement, I looked at 10 projects that were set up and completed under that, and pulled expenditures, historical expenditures between 2014 and 2022 came to about $242 million. So just to kind of give some perspective, this is something that's been done at that facility pretty much since it came online back in I believe, the early 80s. It was done several times in the 80s and the 90s. There was, in fact, bonding that was done back in the 80s and 90s to complete projects of this nature, and this is just continuing to keep the useful life of the facility, extend the useful life, and keep it operating. Now, there are 2 more much smaller new projects that Solid Waste is requesting. One is going to be another parent project for essentially facilities, site building upgrades, and then a project to replace the disposal fee sign at the campus, to replace it with an electronic sign that can be changed as the rates change periodically. Instead of having to go out and change the sign, they can do it electronically. And that concludes the capital report. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Paul.
So, good morning, Commissioners. Paul Sacco, Director of Solid Waste. So I'm going to run through the FY24 accomplishments and the work plan for the department, and then I'll be happy to field any questions that you might have, either what they talked about with OMB and maybe with the operational conditions of solid waste as they stand today or going forward. So just giving you some of the highlights of the accomplishments. The first bullet there with our tip trailer transfer area, we actually went live with that this week. It's something that we've been working on for the better part of a year. The conditions that we were experiencing at solid waste were almost 50% of our volume of transactions that were coming to the facility represented about 10% of the actual volume of trash coming to the facilities. And they were the smaller, what we call mom and pop tip trailer operations. And we found that we were having to divert a lot of trash just based on wait times in the yard and getting our larger customers up to the waste energy facility or actually to the landfill if we were in a diversion. And it was really creating, a problem for the larger customers that were trying to get in and out and get back to their routes. So we devised a plan and a project to actually create a different area where those tip trailers would go to, dump their trash, and at the end of the day, that material would be picked up and brought to the waste energy facility. So we're only on day 3. I can tell you in the first 2 days, you know, the times that we've been out to inspect and watch what was going on, the effects were much shorter lines at the waste energy facility, and the diversions were next to nothing. So far, so good. We're working with the city of St. Pete that's actually going to be working with the data from a GIS standpoint. They can actually measure their time in the yard, and they have been doing that for the year prior to. We've drawn a line in the sand, and they're going to look at that same data after June 10th, and then we can actually measure what that reduction in the time would be, and we can also measure the reduction of the waste that is no longer going to the landfill and actually taking up landfill space. So that's where we are with that. The next 2 bullets, I just want to point out that the landfill life is continuing to hold at about 80. The solid waste vision is to get to zero waste to landfill by 2050. You know, the master plan was adopted in 2020, so we've actually not really, we're extending the life of that landfill. We haven't really lost landfill life. Now, we have a lot more things that we want to do and are left to do and recommendations coming from the master plan, but we're on a good path and we're doing what we can to kind of hold our own until some of those additional projects are implemented. And then the second is the countywide, or the next bullet, the countywide recycling rate at 70.5% for 2023. We're always a year in the rears as we do our calculations. That's up 3% from the year prior, so we're trending upward. It'll probably land us back in the top 5 in the state as far as what we've done for recycling as a whole. This isn't just single stream recycling at the curbside. This is all the recycling that's done in the county when you're talking about construction debris, what's happening on the commercial side as well as what's happening on the residential side. Those bullets, the landfill life and the countywide recycling rate, they're the 2 key performance measures for solid waste. Everything else that we measure just folds up under what those 2 are. And we hold them near and dear to our hearts, and everything that we do, we look at the master plan as decision-making. Is it in the plan? Is it not in the plan? What would it mean if we were to move forward? And then what it means using these 2 key performance indicators. So that's kind of our Bible and what we go back to looking at for what we want to measure. The next bullet there, we're approaching, in fact, we may be at 1,600 days without a lost time injury, which for our world, with everything that's big going on out there, is huge for us. I'm very proud of our team and what they've embraced as far as a safety culture and continue to embrace moving forward. Couple bullets down from that, reducing our water sample analysis cost. That was touched by OMB. That was $350,000 a year by outsourcing that. Cassie here had a great part of doing that, but also our team in pulling all those opportunity costs together for us to go outside and make that happen. And we're actually have started that moving forward this year. Moving forward to the work plan, the two that I really want to highlight here, first is assessing the feasibility, which we've just about completed, of our microgrid system on site. So this would actually be an electric grid, if you would, that would take the power from waste energy, and then the future project for the floating solar array and merge them on site to power all our buildings on site and to allow us to move that power in and about and actually push more power out to the grid when the solar project comes online. We need that grid to be put into place first. So they're almost done with the final design criteria with that, and then we're going to go out for a design build project. And when they're in the design for that, we're going to move forward with the solar project and kind of dovetail those in together. But until that grid's in place, we really can't put the solar power project in place because there's nowhere to push the power to. We need to get the grid in operation. When all of that's said and done, we'll be able to operate almost as an island. We'll have one Duke feed coming into a main switchgear in case everything else is offline and we need something to operate. We'll be able to operate with that Duke service as opposed to the, I don't know how many Duke services we have coming on site, but every building, every lift station, I mean, there's probably, how many counts do we have? 25 or 30. And kind of simplify that. And then we kind of, reduce our costs in doing that as well. Next up, a couple bullets down, we're going to be coming back to the board and talking and presenting on the final determination for the MRF We're going to be talking with the TMC in July. We're going to be meeting with the city managers in August. And the recommendations, if they hold true coming through that, will come back to the board and present our final recommendation to you on August 29th. We'll also be presenting to you the status of where we're at with the ordinance. We'll be presenting the progress that we've made with the power brokering, which would likely be coming back to you in the September timeframe. So the timing of that update in August would be perfect. And then we'll also present an update to you on where we're at with the RFP process for a new operator. Well, I'll say the next operator for the waste energy. It could be the existing operator. We're just going through the process of going out for a competitive RFP to find out what that would look like. So that's kind of what I wanted to highlight here. If there's any questions that you have or anything that we can provide additional information for, we'd be happy to do that.
Questions? Commissioner Eggers.
Well, thank you for the presentation. You know, you don't get out there I don't get out there very much. So there's an awful lot that's going on. So I wrote a couple of notes down. I said, costs are going up. I guess that's the operator costs, short term anyway. Bids for new operators. Revenues are down. EPA restrictions are increasing. So if I were an investor, this would be a tough industry to look at right now. We're kind of in that transition phase. It seemed like when I first came on the commission, it was like everybody panic because in 2024, Duke revenues are going to go away and we're going to have nothing. So maybe just give a kind of a global assessment on where we are. Obviously, it's an 80-year life, and keeping it, that's a great thing, but we have to be able to do that without, mortgaging everybody's house in the county. So could you maybe give a kind of a global perspective?
Absolutely. So we knew we were facing the cliff with the revenue drop with the power purchase agreement going away. We started this back in 2018 and 19, and if those that have been here for a while, and even for those that have not, the waste energy facility has been operating since the mid 80s, and there wasn't a rate increase really until 2019. And we really started with the first of those rate increases because we were looking at the long-term power purchase agreement going away, which in the final year represents a 55% reduction in our revenue. Now, we haven't been spending what's been coming in on that revenue, so I don't want to give the impression that with all that money going away, we have nothing. We've been putting a lot of that money in reserves. Our reserves are over $300 million, and they're there for three reasons. One, to reinvest and continue reinvesting in waste energy because there's no better technology or no better opportunity for us to reduce the volume of trash that's going to the landfill, which the board has adopted the master plan to keep that life going. Second is we need to continue to fund those items in the master plan that will continue to support waste energy and other things that would minimize either the waste coming to the waste energy or the solid waste facility or to better dispose or handle the waste that we have to deal with when it gets there. And then third is a rate stabilization portion of the reserves that would be used to offset those revenues until a longer term increase of those tipping fees kind of catch up and allow the revenues and the expense lines to cross, which we think is going to be probably another 20 years. But we started at such a low tipping point or tipping fee. I mean, we were in the 30s back in 2019. We're at about 50, 51 right now. And the others that are in the state that operate these facilities and these types of operations, they're above 70. So we're, from an industry standard or standpoint, we're still way behind, but we don't want to push to be what the industry is. We still want to be smart about what we do. But the rate study is going to be done and updated every year to keep everybody abreast, the TMC and the board, and what goes into our budget projections every year. But right now, we see that 6 to 7% increase to continue on year over year to kind of offset what we see with that drop in revenue. Now, the power brokering that we're looking to do, if we were to just take a standard operating agreement from Duke going forward for a power purchase agreement, that would be in the neighborhood of $25 to $30 a megawatt. and we sell 450,000 megawatts a year. The power brokering is pushing that number closer to 35 to 40. So we know right now that's a better option for us. If for some reason power brokering falls off the table or doesn't become an option, we can always go back and do a power purchase agreement with Duke. They have to offer us agreement by law because we're a qualified facility to make that happen. So we always have that backstop. But right now, power brokering is the best option. And we can still look at doing other power purchase agreements with others outside of Duke. We're considered a qualified facility. We can sell our power to other utilities wherever they are, as long as we can cover the transportation costs over their transmission costs, I guess I should say, over their areas. And we're actually evaluating that, and there may be one or two options that we may be bringing back for consideration that may be in excess of that $40 megawatt. So all those things together with the reserves as a stabilization fund, the increased tipping fees over time, and then knowing that we can sell our power more than we can sell to Duke, those three things together will help us match and exceed the funding gap that we're seeing. Definitely not a time to panic. We have monies for reserves to do the things that we talked about. We have to keep some money in reserves for the long-term closure of the landfill whenever we get there. But the longer we kick that out and we do the zero waste to the landfill thing, that money, that obligation is small because you're looking at a future cost. So that present value can continue to be smaller as we continue to do those things, so our reserves can be used for other things. I would say I did not expect Covanta's number to come back to be almost a 50% increase for operations for waste energy. That may be what the market is, but that's why we're going to go out and test the market, because we don't know. And Covanta didn't really want to open up their books and tell us anything more than that. We've looked at it with our team. We think that's high. We think that number is going to be probably $3, $4, $5 less per ton for processing, but we won't know unless we go through that process. So the extension that we need for Covanta to run that plant for another year, we have to pay them what they're asking or they won't operate our plant. We need somebody to operate the plant. So for this short term, this year, we're going to have to eat that cost until we can get out. And the faster we can do that, then the faster that we can get out of that extension. So the extension is not a 1 year full. It's going to be 6 months with 2-3 month extensions to give us that flexibility that if we do finish that competitive process earlier, we can get out. And that extension should be coming to you probably in the August to September timeframe for you to consider and approve. And then, as John spoke, the RFP process is a two-part process. It's going to be an RFQ for part one to shortlist those folks that we think can operate the facility. And then part two would be the formal RFP process, which I would expect for you to come back, or for us to come back to you in early summer.
Well, I feel a little bit better. I was kidding, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I do appreciate that overview. I think it's a really dynamic industry that we're going through. Thank you on the explanation of the Covanta. That was one of the Covanta increase just seemed out of line, so I appreciate that. Also, the MRF recommendation, looking forward to hearing about that. Just one quick discussion about the microgrid and the solar project, and where is that happening on campus, so to speak, and just a little bit more about that.
Sure. So the microgrid would be no different to what you would see if Duke was running lines around the neighborhood. I don't know if they're going to be above ground or underground. I think it's going to be a hybrid of the two. I would tell you that all the new structures that we would put in would be all above the floodplain to protect the electrical infrastructure, but the underground stuff, can survive underground just like it does around the rest of the county. So we'll just have that distribution on site that we can move the power around like we want to. The solar power project is actually going to be a floating solar array that we're going to put in the large pond that's out there on probably the southwest corner. So that's a 60-acre pond, 65-acre pond. We're putting in a 5-megawatt system, and it's about 2 acres per megawatt. So 10 acres of that pond will be covered by solar panels when we're done. we're still probably 2 to 3 years out before you would actually see
So
that.
self-sufficiency on power.
Self-sufficiency for our buildings on site.
Right.
So that 5 megawatts, we'll use about a half a megawatt, and the other 4 would be the offset, what we call the parasitic load that the plant uses to operate when it's online, which would allow what's being generated by the plant, another 4.5 to be pushed out to the grid.
Out to the grid, yeah.
So 4.5 megawatts is a lot of money when you're looking at per hour over the course of the year at $40 a megawatt.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the update kind of on the industry and where you guys are and what we're doing. And looking forward to that meeting in August, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Commissioner Justice, then Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Contrary to Commissioner, I'm incredibly encouraged by the conversation this morning from where we were a few years ago, thinking that we were going to fall off a cliff when the Duke Energy ended. So a lot of good news. My only question is, how many really? Because when we ended, and I can't remember the name of the company that we had before, Covanta, but when we ended that and we went out, there was really only 2 or 3 companies across the country that did this. So what's the status today? How many companies really do this kind of work?
Well, it's nationally, Covanta is the company. And there may be 1 or 2 smaller ones that probably wouldn't have the resume to operate a plant of our size. Pinellas' plant is probably the largest in the industry. If not, it would be the top 1 or 2. Because you really can't build anything bigger under the laws. I mean, 80 megawatts, you're capped as far as being a qualified facility for waste energy. And we're at 75. But times have changed, and we know, and I can tell you I know because I've spoke with companies that are operating these plants internationally, and they are at our size, and some of them are probably 3 or 4 times the size that we have. And the indications that we're getting from these groups is they want to get into the U.S. and operating these facilities. And I think going out on the street and doing this, we've met with them, and they said that they would be proposers if this went out on the street. So I would expect at least 3, if not as many as 5.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's always every once in a while to go out and evaluate. But how we're balancing that, and if they feel like they have a monopoly on the world, maybe that's part of it. I know over the last several years we have tracked different pieces of legislation at Tallahassee and Washington that it would impact our operation. I haven't heard anything recently on anything moving or any talks.
It's kind of dead from the state standpoint. But I would tell you on a national level, what was spoken to about the EPA standard, that's been, the rule changes have been ongoing discussions for about a year. So the National Waste Energy Organization, coupled with the state of Florida, and Florida has the most waste energy facilities of any state. We have 10, and there's 57 or 58 throughout the country. So we have the biggest, biggest dog in the fight when you're talking about this. So we've been up to Washington in March when they asked for their comments. We met with several of the delegation inside and outside of Florida. We've given all our information to the EPA, and they're evaluating those comments now. They're not looking to make a decision until after the election. They're talking about late November at the earliest. So we're not sure what's going to come of that. I've tried to get some information for today in case it was asked, but I have no more information to share other than what I'm sharing right now. The EPA has not tipped their hat or let us know where they're going. So I wish I had more to share, but all we could do is spend a little bit of money to evaluate what those impacts are. And that's the 50 to 200 million that we shared today, and the operating costs would come in the form of additional chemicals that are needed to treat the gases before they go out the stack. And for the levels that we're seeing, that's the best number that we have given today. The EPA may change a portion of what they're looking at. They may go, in total with what they're looking at. So until we get a little more indication, I really can't give you anybody a better idea of what those costs would look like.
Okay. Very good. Appreciate the information today.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good to see you, Paul. Thanks for the presentation, all the information. So with Duke Energy's agreement ending December 31st, what did you program in for the rest of fiscal year 25? Just the standard purchasing agreement with Duke going forward at, I thought you said $30 or $35 a megawatt, or the power sharing agreement? What did you program for the rest of the budget going forward?
I believe we programmed in the power brokering piece that we saw today, or we discussed today.
Yes, we have about 3 months worth remaining in fiscal year 25 of that Duke Energy power purchase agreement. So from October through December, we'll still receive funds from that. And then kicking in January, we estimated the cost of the power brokering through the rest of the fiscal year.
And that was at, how much per megawatt was that?
That one's closer to the 35 range. We were a little conservative on that because we didn't have an agreement in place yet.
Got it. Okay. So it could come in higher, hopefully.
Correct.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? So I have a question for Jewel. Do we have a policy, because you mentioned maybe going with an international company. Do we have a policy about any countries we do not partner with?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Is that something that is important to this board?
Well, both of the companies that operate the plants internationally, they actually are based in the U.S. as well. So, I mean, they actually do work in the U.S. today, just not in the waste energy world. They do energy, one company does energy in the balance, and then the other does mostly waste collections, operate MRFs and things of that nature. But
Right,
they have,
but what is their country of origin? Where are they from? What?
One is owned by their parent company is Japanese, and
Okay.
the other is in Spain.
Okay. I just, I saw a couple of heads nod here. I didn't know if there were heads nodding on this side. I didn't know if that's something that, if we're going to start doing international, and I don't have issues with those countries, but if we are going to start doing international, which you may be the first one, I don't think we do others, if that's something that's important to this board that we would need a policy on. So that could be a day for another workshop, another day. I would encourage, if you feel strongly about it, talk to Barry and give him your feelings. And it's just that we hadn't had international really come up as far as contracting.
Yeah, time I've been here, I don't think we've discussed it, but when you kind of went down that path, I could think about who's going to control our energy, right? and a plant. So I could see, obviously, the countries he's mentioned wouldn't be the concern that maybe the commission would have. But that's certainly something we could discuss.
Okay. Paul?
I would also point out that Covanta, the existing operator, was just bought by an investor group that is based in Europe. So it's already happening.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really have control over who buys who or takes over what company and what corporation. It's just that I just didn't know if it was worth having that discussion or having an underlying policy that makes sure we don't go down a rabbit hole we don't want to go down. That's all. When you brought it up, I thought about it, and I'm not saying we're going to do anything today. I'm just saying it might be something. If you're interested in this, talk to Barry about it. If it bubbles up that there's enough interest, then I recommend we have a workshop and discuss it. Thank you. Now, are we going to go to any other comments, discussion about? No? So are we going to the Lellman one then? Okay.
Yes, Commissioner. If you reorient your package to the Lellman, it's in the header, and we'll start at the top of page 1. So getting the Lellman Solid Waste Collection and Disposal Fund to the steady state is our final topic. In FY24, the board approved a $300,000 loan from the Solid Waste Operating Fund to stabilize Lellman's revenues and reserves. The loan terms, it will be paid back between FY24 and 29 at the initial interest rate of 3.85%. And that rate, according to the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners investment policy, is adjusted annually to a composite rate. The budget drivers, beginning on the bottom of page 1 and continuing on the top of page 2, the FY25 budget increases $618,000 Personnel services increase $170, and operating expenses increase $86,000. And that, Commissioners, is the OMB Solid Waste Department budget presentation, as easy as 1, 2, 3. I will give it back to Paul.
I really don't have anything more to add unless you all have questions.
Questions?
Just one quick one.
Okay, Commissioner Eggers.
So, I mean, obviously, a huge increase on the budget side because more people have gotten on in line. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Or do they have other alternatives that they just voluntarily have come over time? That's
It's just a volunteer.
in a big increase this year. Is it?
Yeah, if the board would remember last year, well, actually, the direction that solid waste was operating under is when the fund was originally put in place, or the MSTU, I guess, was put in place, it became a little bit overfunded. So we were asked to, spend that down before we would go back and look at any kind of, increases given the area that was there. So we got caught between that decrease going down last year and an increase of people coming into the voluntarily wanting to come into the collection. So that's why we made that quick change last year at the budget session, and now we're just trying to keep up with that going
What's the
forward.
monthly charge for residential pickup?
Right now, it's $16, and I think it's going up to, it's 18. Yeah, it's 18 going to 20.
18 going to 20?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
per month, yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So when did we start this? When did we go, we're going into we went into the garbage business pickup, right? I'm reading this right. When did we start that?
For the Lowman area, I
Yeah.
think it was back in 2014, 13 or
Okay.
14.
It was after, it was,
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So I guess I'm curious, and I wasn't here then, and I guess I'm curious as to necessarily why we got into that business. I understand Lowman has different interests, and if each house can use a different company, it can get messy, because, right? Well, I just, wouldn't it be cheaper if we contracted out with just one company?
That's
Well,
what you're doing. You
for
create
the
a
Lowman
franchise.
For the Lowman area, that's what this is. It's one company does all the
One
Lowman.
company does it. Okay, so
Right.
we're not in the garbage pickup business?
No.
We-
Okay, because
we
I was
developed a
reading this and I was
franchise.
like, are we in the garbage pickup business? Because that just didn't make sense.
Yeah, we
Okay.
developed a franchise for the Lowman area, okay? So
Okay.
in essence, you direct your bid to one operator.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, good, because I was reading it going, did we really get into that? So, okay, thank you. I feel better about it.
This was the neighborhoods came to the county, and this is back way before 12, because this was before I came on. And so some folks would have, and it was the Wild West, kind of like in other
Yeah.
areas where and some folks were kind of piling on, sharing resources. And so this was county sanitation, James, I can't remember his last name, his company for a long time. And then just a couple years ago, it went Coastal won the bid, or county sold to Coastal. So, but it is one company that goes in there and wins the bid on it.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, because I don't remember this conversation in the past, so anyways, thank you. Any other questions, discussion? Great, thank you so much.
All right. Next up, Parks and Conservation.
And Chris, if you want to make introductions, once everybody's seated, that'd be great.
Yes, ma'am. So we're going to have Veronica Edel here next to me from OMB presenting to start with, and Paul Causey and Jolanda Jordan from Parks and Conservation Services presenting on their behalf. In the middle there, that we're going back to a non-enterprise, so a governmental capital program here, so I will have a small piece on their capital in the middle. So I'm going to give Veronica just a few more minutes to get ready, and then we will get going. Yeah, we're trading one Paul for another Paul. So, good.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm here to present for the Parks and Conservation Resources Department. We're going to start on page 1 at the bottom with the efficiencies and cost-saving measures. And this is a high-level summary. For FY25, the department reduced its budget by $153,700. And then continuing on to the top of page 2, the department reduced its 24 budget by $105,880. And then going back further to FY23, they reduced the budget by $110,500. And the details are all there on page 2 for that information. And moving to the topics for discussion, excuse me, at the top of page 3. One of the big things this year, which is, I think, a tremendous opportunity, is the tree bank fund citation revenues that have increased dramatically over the last 2 years, or actually last year, 23, and currently still seeing some very sizable increases in 24. So the prior years generated an average of only about $200,000 a year. So continuing with what's been happening in 23 and 24 isn't certain, and but at the meantime, we've, and I'll go into this a bit more, we have reserves that have built up and given us an opportunity to consider how to best use this recent accumulation of funds to support PCR's work plan and the county strategic plan. And this is all in compliance with County Ordinance 166-57 for the Tree Bank Fund. The FY25 budget does include funding to continue the current level of lifeguard staffing. It's 25 seasonal full-time employees, so it's 12 and a half FTE, but 25 positions for the summer season. The 25 budget also restructures program coding to better align the department with the National Parks and Recreation Association's accreditation standards, and to be able to communicate a high level of operation and maintenance information. Most of what had been programs is in a separate cost center. So we have all that information, and we have created a cost center beginning in FY25 for the beach and water safety area. So rather than having the lifeguards split into 3 sections, they'll be all under one cost center. We'll be able to maintain that information and track it, and then at the higher level, we can get that roll up to be able to work with our accreditation more effectively. Then going on to the budget drivers at the bottom of page 3. So the Parks and Conservation Resources are made up of the general fund and the tree bank fund. The total FY25 expenditures are increasing $833,640 with the 3% countywide salary adjustment and FRS retirement actuarial increases. That $833,000 is primarily general fund increase. And then looking at the revenues, based on the actual revenue in these recent fiscal years, the general fund is now projected with a net increase of $835,880 to bring it up to about $9 million total. And this does not include, I'll cover that in a minute, but this does not cover the user fee proposal that would increase revenue further. And the tree bank revenue is budgeted to increase only about $55,000, just under $56,000 to $210,000 for FY25. And this is a very, very conservative estimate. I didn't feel comfortable trying to say that we were going to continue to bring in, as much as $1 million a year, because it's going to ebb and flow with development and activity throughout the county. So it does not assume that the same activity we've been seeing in 23 and 24 will continue through 25. So very conservative. And then turning to the top of page 4 for expenditure budget drivers, as I noted earlier, the tree bank fund revenues generated an increase, and what that did is created in the requirement side $3 million over 2 years in our reserves. and that gives us an opportunity to fund a very ambitious plan to plant more trees for positive impacts in the community sustainability. The department's FTE count remains flat at 201.2, and that includes the seasonal lifeguards. Operating expenses decrease over 96,170 due to the department's cost-saving measures, and then capital outlay is increasing by 10,000. And then going to the middle of page 4, we have a summary of the proposed user fee changes. So it's the big table on page 4. So these user fees, you can see at the bottom, are expected to generate as much as $1.1 million in additional revenue. That's in developing the budget, and again, the estimates that you see in the budget right now do not include that $1.1 million potential. In developing the budget, PCR reviewed its user fees extensively, and they propose an increase in 8 of the fees for FY25, and you'll see those listed and the reasons for the changes on page 4. So the objective is to help recover costs with increased shelter, camping, and parking fees that are consistent with our regional peers' pricing. And then going to top of page 5, I'm going to turn this over to Chris for the CIP report.
So good morning again, Commissioners. I'm here to tell you that Parks partners with Public Works, Admin Services, and Construction Services to all of them together to get their capital program done. 2 things of note. One is all of their ARPA projects are on a pace to meet the deadline of this December, so everything is moving along just like it should, either on that chart we used before, either a dark green already achieved it or a light green well on its path to achieve it. The other thought is 3 out of their 9 playground projects that are in ARPA are already complete, and they're on a pace to get those complete well within the 2026 deadline for ARPA as well. So all on pace, all at a good pace, and all in partnership with the folks that help them get their capital budget done. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul Causey for accomplishments, performance measures, and work plan items.
Thank you, Chris. Paul Causey, Parks and Conservation Resources Director. Starting with the FY24 accomplishments, one of the things we've been working on now for the past couple of years is getting our level of service goals for the assets for which the Parks and Conservation Resources Department is the subject matter expert. That includes things like boardwalks, boat ramps, picnic shelters, those types of assets. Realizing how important it is to have good partners. In this past year, I think some of you may have had a chance to tour the Majid Discovery Garden, working with the Florida Botanical Gardens Foundation. We now have the Majid Discovery Garden, and we also worked with the Botanical Garden Foundation to move the gift shop out of the lobby of our office building and into what was the former tropical pavilion. And that, I think, is going to be very helpful to the foundation itself in raising money, because when the gardens are the busiest on Saturdays and Sundays, their gift shop has always been closed up until now. Also working with partners, we revitalized 3/4 of an acre at Fort DeSoto Park, revegetated it to enhance the bird habitat out there. We've also worked with Tampa Bay Watch to set up an oyster cleaning station at a couple of our parks. Those oysters are cured, and then they're used for living shoreline projects like we're doing at Philippi Park. As Chris mentioned, we have completed 3 of our ARPA playgrounds. As a matter of fact, Walsingham Park final walkthrough was just yesterday afternoon in the rain. And we also have 3 projects that we anticipate finishing this year. Those playgrounds will be at Fred Howard Park, Ridgecrest Park, and Philippi Park. After 18 years, we are seeking a new concessionaire for Fort DeSoto Park. We just completed the reviews of those proposals. Our current concessionaire decided not to submit, so this will be a brand-new operation out at Fort DeSoto Park. We had 5 proposers, very good proposals, so we're looking forward to that. That contract, the current contract, expires in December of this year. And then we also have on the street a proposal, an RFP for Sand Key and Madeira Beach concessions, which expires in January of next year. So we should be seeing some changes, hopefully some new innovative ideas for those 2 regional parks. We'll continue to work with the City of Dunedin with the development of the Gladys Douglas property. One of the things that we expect to do this year is our invasive management and reforestation portion of the project. Also want to mention that of the $3.5 million that the county contributed towards that purchase, we were reimbursed $2.7 million of that through grants and the legislative line item. And finally, also want to mention that we continue to seek grants to assist with our projects. Just in this past year, we have received over $2.7 million in grant funds to do things like Rainieri Park, the Weeden Island Salt Marsh Project, Leoman Neighborhood Park, and we also contributed, or FDEP contributed through a grant, $200,000 to the Taylor Park Playground. Moving on to our work plan. As Veronica mentioned, we have probably seen more funds in the tree bank than we have in quite some time. So one of the things that is on our work plan this year is working with our urban forestry department to establish a department tree program. We are also developing a volunteer invasive removal program. We're going to continue our efforts at the acquisition of parkland. One of the 3 that we're working on now, I do want to mention Gray Oaks. Actually, we have acquired that property, and we are working with the White Souls and the West Klosterman Group to hopefully get those properties acquired by the end of the calendar year. Next year, our reservation software contract expires, so we will be going out or preparing an RFP to bring in someone to continue that online program. And I think that's probably one of the things that we're really looking forward. It's no secret we've had some issues rolling that out. We're hoping to have a lot more capabilities with a new software. And then also want to mention one of the big projects that we have coming up. You actually voted on or approved the application for the wastewater grant to get Philippi Park, our oldest park, off of septic and onto sewer. So that's going to be a big project. One other thing I did want to mention, in FY25, we will actually have probably more park projects underway that this county has had in 3 decades. Rainieri Park will be under construction. Dansville Community Park will be under construction. The Cross Bayou Athletic Association complex will be under construction, as well as High Point Park, which we're doing in collaboration with the school district and the city of Largo, as well as the 119th Street green space area. As far as performance measures, as Veronica mentioned, a lot of things that we're doing now, we're looking to align ourselves with accreditation standards through the Commission on the Accreditation of Parks and Recreation Agencies. It's part of the National Recreation Park Association key performance indicators. So a lot of those things that you see here align with that so that we can set the groundwork, looking at how we compare with like-sized agencies serving like-sized populations. Of course, some of these things, like the cost of service per acre, cost of service per visitor, standard type things we've been tracking for a number of years. We continue to emphasize the use of volunteers. Now that we've gotten past COVID, we see those numbers coming up again. We expect to have over 50,000 volunteer hours in the coming year, which will have a significant impact on what we're able to do. One of the other things I did want to mention when we talk, of course, visitation is a big thing for us, and our park system attracts over 22 million visitors per year. And just as an example, I think we're seeing a lot of growth this year. Just to throw out a figure, this past Memorial Day weekend, Fort DeSoto Park had 26,000 vehicles enter the park over that 3-day weekend. The previous 3-year average was only 16,500 vehicles. So you can see what kind of impact that has, especially on the staff who are out there every day. But we are seeing bigger numbers in attendance overall. And with that, are there any questions on any of those items?
Any questions? Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Always a good presentation. I love the term citation revenue. So is that from people cutting trees down that they're not supposed to? Or what does that mean?
Citation revenue is is the parking citation revenue.
Oh, okay. In the tree fund bank.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, those are the fines that people pay for cutting. I thought you were referring.
So with such a big increase, I thought you might have gone after Duke Energy for some of their work. And I would imagine it's probably better to be conservative next year for them. Thank you for that clarification. Philippi Park issue, where we took an area, kind of cordoned it off. Update on that?
Yes, we're working with the state as well as our historical preservation people. We will be, as I've mentioned, putting in a new playground at Philippi Park. We're right now working to make sure that the area we're proposing to put that is well outside of that area. And once we have that location chosen, we're going to work with the state experts as well as the Seminole tribe to have a clear understanding on how we best preserve that area where the current playground is, as well as the pavilion. But we will be taking those areas out of service.
Okay. Thank you for that. Gray Oaks, Whitesell, and Klosterman, could you give me like a summary what the acreage of each of those are and what we paid for them or what we're offering to pay for them?
Let's see, we acquired the Gray Oaks property. That was 9 acres. I believe the cost was $500,000. The West Klosterman property, as I said, we're working with the West Klosterman Preservation Group. We are each committing $1.5 million, so that would be a $3 million cost. It could be a little less, could be, we're going to have an appraisal done before we do the closing on that, to have a more current appraisal on that property. But the last appraisal that was done, I think, was $2.8 million, so it might be a little less than 3. And the Whitesell property, I believe that cost, if I'm going to have to go through memory here, but I think it worked out to 4.3 or $4.63 million. So you've got 9 acres with the Gray Oaks property, roughly 15, a little more with the West Klosterman property, and 15.1 or 2 with the Whitesell property. So about 40 acres of new acquisitions.
That's kind of what I was trying to get at. And then you also estimated in this penny at the beginning, having about somewhere between 10 and 15 million for land purchasing. Is that new parkland?
Yes.
And
Over the course of this penny,
Yeah.
there was $15 million
in the budget.
budgeted.
And how are we doing on that total?
Well, after we get these 3, I think we'll be right where we expect to be with that, as far as we're 5 years in, and the way it's been budgeted is at about $1.5 million per year
Okay.
in the penny.
So we're on schedule then?
Yes.
Okay. Appreciate it.
And we've also, just want to mention, we're also on schedule with the acquisitions that we had brought to you over the past couple of years as being priorities. You know, we're working through that and getting those within our inventory.
I see the 24.3 acres per 1,000 people. That's pretty good numbers. What are the national numbers? Do you know? It seems like they're in the teens, but
Yeah, they are in the teens. I think it's somewhere in the 14 to 17 acres per 1,000. So we're above
Yeah.
average,
Yeah.
as we like to say.
And that's just the unincorporated part of Pinellas County.
No, that
Does that include
covers
everybody?
Covers everyone for the
Oh, well,
entire
I-
983,000 people or so that are in Pinellas County.
But these 24.3 acres, the acres that we are including here are what? All the.
Those are our
Ours,
acres,
right,
just our
divided
acres. So-
by-
So we're actually doing much better as a county when you include the.
Cities.
I think there's roughly 4,000 or 5,000 acres in municipal parkland and state park.
Yeah,
So-
okay. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Paul. And our park system is a real benefit to our residents, and you do a great job. And we've got an incredible park system, so I appreciate all of your hard work. So the reserves, I believe this is all tree fund. I just want to confirm that. The reserves look like they're tripling for 2025. Is that all tree fund?
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk about what projects we have going on the Pinellas Trail right now?
Oh, boy, I can't. I know that, I think you're talking about the extension, the loop, and doing those types of things.
Well, and also just kind of maintenance, because I know we've been improving some intersections and things like that along the way.
Yep. And Public Works is really the overseer of that. Do we? I know we've almost completed all of the intersection improvements that Public Works does. I know that, we are in the process of enhancing our courtesy campaign on the trail. We're working with the Friends of the Pinellas Trail to put our permanent courtesy signs out on the trail. And then the other construction projects, I know they're almost getting close to completion of the bridge over the the canal.
Good morning, Jill Silverboard, County Admin. That's correct. So the primary thing that we're waiting on to wrap up all of the intersection crossing improvements is for our ADA mats that relate to the pedestrian use. We had a little bit of a supply issue there. I actually have a map laying on my desk of which ones are complete and which ones are, we do the red, yellow, green thing. So that project is well on the way. We expect to have that concluded no later than the end of this fiscal year or calendar year. The other projects that we've been working on, we've had very close communication the last couple of years with City of Dunedin on a couple of items related to their section, which, as we all know, is extremely busy, extremely urban. Those communications continue. Paul didn't mention, but we do have some, the re-signage that we're working on so that we can accurately reflect what's happening with e-bikes. And, the courtesy campaign that he mentioned, that's still a go. He and I have also been, with his staff, meeting with the Friends of the Trail because we are approaching the 35th anniversary of Pinellas Trail next year. So we're trying to start talking about that and what we may do or get your approval for, so that'll be something you'll see. In terms of the South Loop, we finished the North Loop with the exception of the bridge over the canal, and that is under contract, so that's going to get wrapped up. On the South Loop, you've seen a couple of grant applications that you've supported for us to get state dollars. And we also are currently working on an agreement with City of Pinellas Park for a very large stretch. You're going to see that item. I saw that agenda item in the system, so that's coming to you fairly soon. So we have quite. That's to get the trail to Almerton on that South Loop piece. So we're chipping away at it. Sorry, I don't have more specifics, but I can always get those if you need them.
Well, appreciate that update. Maybe we can have that at a future work session, more thorough update on that. But sure. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Akers?
Thank you. My annual critique of the operational changes to the trail, so for the record, I still think we need to switch back to the other way, especially in light of the e-bike increase on our trails. I mean, the speeds are crazy. The driving on, even the bikes that work together and being in the same pathway as people that are walking and all that just creates a lot of operational issues. Maybe one size doesn't fit all throughout the whole county, and maybe you can look at things like that. The only question I had was on the Tarpon Springs, the Elfer Spur. Maybe you could, just a brief update on that, and realistically, what are the alternatives to getting that piece fixed?
I think that's a Public Works Joe issue also.
That's a Jill issue, okay. Or, I'm sorry.
It's actually a Kelly issue, but Joe will answer.
I'd say it's a City of Tarpon Springs issue.
Yeah.
They actually own that portion, as you probably will recall. But we are continuing to work with the City of Tarpon Springs to see what, if anything, we can do. Kelly gave me an update on this, and I apologize. It's kind of gotten mixed up with my vacation and my COVID, but it is something that we have been in recent communications with them about. Right now, it remains closed. It's dangerous.
That's not the county park? That's not part of the county trail park?
No, it's my understanding that portion is owned by the City of Tarpon Springs.
Oh, okay, because we had some conversation the other day, I think it was at the MPO, talking about that Elfer, and it was clearly stated in that meeting, I'm not sure if it was by myself or somebody else or both, that it's a county trail. So I just want to make sure that that's the case, because there's still a lot of finger pointing about who's supposed to be taking care of it.
Yeah, I heard y'all had quite the conversation.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah, no, it is our trail, but we're not the underlying property owner. The city is the underlying property owner. And improvements that have failed, that have affected the trail, were Tarpon Springs revetments
it's a tight area, and so there's different portions of land ownership. So they are doing the trail's ours, but the spur is theirs, and so we can't do the trail without their supporting area. So there's a study that Tarpon Springs is doing on fixing it. Now we're talking about who pays.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, all right. Appreciate the update. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly, for texting me and letting me know these things. So.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, any other questions? So I have a question. So are all our parks, excuse me, are all of our parks on septic?
No. Most of our parks are not on septic. We still have a few areas. I think John Chestnut may have some septic drain fields. It's one of the things that is part of our Penny utility infrastructure that we're working on, is to get all of those off of septic.
Okay, so we don't know how many or we know somebody knows, but we don't know right now.
Right, I don't
Got
have it, I don't have it with me, but
Got
right,
it.
we can get you that information.
Okay, and then you talked at one point about eliminating lifeguards. Where are we on that?
So we're going to come back to you with some recommendations on this. They're discussing some options, and they're in discussions with others about maybe an alternative way of delivering the same service. But we do need to have specific discussions on that topic.
Okay, because, okay. But in this budget, is it reflected to have lifeguards as we normally do, or is it?
It's reflected as it normally is under this budget. So
Okay.
if we're going to spend more, then we're going to have to come up with that money. But we've
Okay.
got it as is until we have further discussions internally about bringing some recommendations to you.
Okay, because I know I've talked about at least one idea. I don't know who I talked to about it, but I know I've talked about, maybe replicating what Clearwater does with maybe Lellman.
Well, if you replicate what Clearwater does, we're going to have to talk about our rate. It's going to cost a lot more money.
Okay.
So, I mean, it would cost a lot of money. But we're looking at ideas like that, like you said. And so we're looking at the best way of delivering it. Clearly, what we have right now is not working.
Okay.
And so we have to come up with an alternative, and we can discuss it now, but I'd rather us bring back some ideas and
No, that's all
options
right.
for you.
I get it. But
so-
I am interested, and I just wanted to make sure we didn't eliminate lifeguards yet.
No, we have not eliminated lifeguards yet. But you will see us bring some recommendations, maybe of consolidating our risk and focusing on our most riskiest areas, like Fort DeSoto,
Okay,
And,
all right. Are we going to consider lowering their age down like it used to be, or no?
I think that's on the table and stuff also.
Okay, all right, great. Well, I look forward to that conversation.
Yep.
Thank you. And if there's no other questions, I think we can move on to Human Services. Thank you, Paul. Chris, if you want to make introductions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have Tony Merrill next to me, returning to present on Human Services. And we have Karen Yacham, Director, and Carrie Vizendu, I'm going to forget the title, but Head of Administration for Human Services, Business Services. Thank you. So with that, I will turn it over to Tony.
Good morning, Commissioners. I am Tony Merrill with the Office of Management and Budget. Thank you, all of you, for allowing me to speak on behalf of the fiscal year 25 budget for Human Services. We're going to go ahead and start looking at page 2. And on page 2, we have our cost efficiency and cost saving measures. By identifying the efficiencies, the department was able to realize reduction costs of $209,930 in their 25 budget submission. In fiscal year 24, they were able to maintain a $1.5 million reduction to the Pinellas County Health Program. This deduction was originally taken in fiscal year 23. You continue on to the bottom of page 2. We're going to talk about some of the topics for discussion. The opiate abatement settlement funds was originally budgeted in fiscal year 24. The spending for this program is on track. The department is initiating a gap analysis, strategic planning for ongoing opiate spending in the coming year for the large transformative projects that will be sustained over the next 18 years. The department has a budget of $32.6 million in fiscal year 25. Over the 18 years, Pinellas County can expect to receive $110.5 million in opiate funding. Second bullet is the hospital-directed payment program, which was initiated just recently by Pinellas County in fiscal year '24 with a $108.4 million budget. In fiscal year '25, Human Services is budgeting it at $119.4 million. I know that Karen will be speaking to you guys in more detail regarding the opioid and the direct hospital payments. Pinellas County Empowerment Team, which is also known as PCET 2.0 contract, has been terminated in fiscal year '24. This program's leaving approximately $557,000 in unused funds for fiscal year '24. Human Services also had budgeted $647,000 in fiscal year '25. $60,000 of the '24 funds and an additional $225.3 thousand of the fiscal year '25 budget has been reassigned to the sheriff to increase the outreach and engagement of those living unsheltered, as well as to assist in the staffing at the Pinellas Safe House. The balance of these funds will be continuously reviewed to determine if additional staffing is needed due to the increased population at Safe Harbor. The reassignment of these funds is due to the unauthorized public camping and public sleeping bill that was just approved by the governor in March of this year. It goes into effect October 1st. If you continue on to page 3, we're going to talk about some of the budget drivers we have for fiscal year '25. The Human Service Department is funded by 4 funds. We have the General Fund, the Opioid Abatement Settlement Fund Act, Hospital Direct Payment Plan Fund, and the Drug Abuse Trust Fund. The general fund budget decreases in fiscal year '25 by $2.0 million. Contractual services, which is part of that general fund, has a decrease of $2.5 million. That's due to the Assisted Outpatient Treatment Grant and the Comprehensive Opioid Stimulant and Substance Use Program. Both of these grants have ended. Personnel services increased by $720,000, and that is due to the 3% salary adjustment on the midpoint for all employees, along with the retirement increase. Human Services does have a decrease to 102 personnel. That's a decrease of 1 person for fiscal year '25. Capital outlay is increasing $589,000 in fiscal year '25. That's due to the capital assistance for hurricane response and recovery efforts, and that is a capital assistance grant to supply us with a new van for health services. On page 3, we're going to look at the user fees and the CIP report. Human Services is requesting an increase of 3 user fees. These are associated with the Consumer Protection Program. These increases are necessary to facilitate the recovery of true costs that are associated for these services. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who will talk a little bit about the CIP programs.
So Commissioners, you'll see there, we have 2 CIP programs in Human Services. They're really 2 phases of the same expansion at the Bayside Clinic, and they are on a pace. Construction Services is working through all the issues. We had amended the budget in the past. We're not looking at any budget amendments at the moment, so everything is on pace with these 2 projects. And with that, I will turn it over to Karen Yatcham for accomplishments, work plan, and performance measures.
Good morning, Commissioners. Karen Yatcham, Human Services Department Director, and with me again, Carrie Vizendu, our Business Services Director. As Tony mentioned, I'm going to walk through our accomplishments, work plan, and performance measures for the department. And I'll just say this has been a really fantastic year for Human Services. We're really bringing a lot of the projects that we've talked about before to close, so it's very, very exciting. As we shared last month, we officially launched the Care About Me Coordinated Access Model, and I'm excited to share that as of today, we have served 266 residents, we have made 171 appointments, and our show rate remains above 80%. So we're really doing some good work here. And as far as who we're serving, we are serving adolescents, we are serving seniors, and we are serving adults. And so we continue to meet every single day to evaluate the process and to ensure that we are focusing on quality. In addition to our coordinated access model, we finalized the contracts for the staffing support for disaster evacuations. So we have contracts for behavioral health clinicians to work inside our shelters serving our residents during disaster times, as well as contracts that bring in additional staff to assist with shelter management operations. And I think that that will be really important in the event that if we are really hit with a catastrophic storm and we have county staff serving in those shelters, those contracted providers can come in and relieve county staff to get back to county operations while we're still hosting our residents who need safe evacuation. We have continued to support the opioid settlement funding process. We created the Opioid Abatement Funding Advisory Board, and we are currently in the gap analysis with Ernst & Young. As a reminder, that's going to be a 16-week engagement where they are interviewing key stakeholders, hosting community listening sessions, surveying our residents, as well as doing a gap analysis of our system. So really looking at where are the gaps and what can be recommended from an international or national landscape to bring additional services into Pinellas County. Once that concludes, we will then initiate the procurement of those services. So really looking at how can we procure services that remain sustainable within the opioid settlement framework for the 18-year settlement. We have expanded our Pinellas Matters program to our second hospital this year, so we are currently at HCA Northside. Right now, we have our implementation team there, which consists of a program manager who is an addictions professional. We also have a licensed clinician that attends the implementation meetings, as well as an MD. And so we're in that kind of culture change process where we are in the emergency department, we're meeting with staff, we're looking at their clinical records, we're doing grand rounds with the hospital team to really challenge them to understand that addiction is a disease and requires a medical pathway. Our next hospital this year will be HCA Largo. And we have, as far as stats so far, we have served over 1,100 residents at the work at Bayfront that we are doing, as well as at HCA Northside. And that means 1,100 residents have gone to the emergency room, possibly for overdose, but possibly for other conditions that are aligned with substance use disorder, and they have received a substance use intervention. And so prior to Pinellas Matters, that number would have been 0 at those hospitals. Those residents would have been seen and given a pamphlet of what's available in community. And so Pinellas Matters really takes that to a whole new level. Regarding our health program, we have led the construction and expansion of the Bayside Health Clinic, which is doubling in size. In addition to the space, we're adding rooms for contagious disease, we're adding additional dental capacity, and we're adding a suite for behavioral health services to be delivered on site. And with this construction, we really didn't miss a beat. So we picked up services, moved them to the Largo Health Department so that our residents can continue receiving care. We have remained on track. So I have staff that are out at the site with hard hats and working with the construction team. And we are going to be reopening that clinic early July and having a ribbon cutting ceremony at the end of July for both the clinic and our new van. As I just mentioned, we also have purchased and designed a new 45-foot mobile medical van. So our old van really was, I think, 11 or 12 years old. We are beyond its useful life. And this new van is really modern. And so in addition to the Bayside Clinic and the van, we worked with the communications team to wrap both of those. So you will see the van driving through the community. It is beautifully wrapped. It says driving to a healthier community. And the Bayside Clinic is going to mirror that. So we're going to have window clings. The paint is going to align. And I'll just say we really want it to stand out. We really want it to be an inviting space for those seeking our safety net services. In addition to the clinic and the van, we have also expanded our footprint with telehealth. So our residents who are part of our safety net program now have 8 different sites in the community where they can receive care via telehealth, just as we can when we need to see a doctor and we're not able to get in to see them in their office. Regarding our staff who meet with our residents and process eligibility, so those are our community connections team, we have continued really focusing on outposting those staff in community to make sure that they are where our residents are. And so by doing that work and also by using technology, so our residents can apply for our health program online or at those telehealth sites, we have been able to consolidate that team. So they are currently in 2 different offices, one in Clearwater, which we lease, and one in St. Pete, which we own. And so in the next coming months, we're going to consolidate that team, close the lease space, move to St. Pete, continue outposting throughout the community, and that saves the county $120,000 in leased costs on a go-forward basis. That team has also initiated a new process this year where when they're meeting with residents for that application for our health program, instead of just saying, go to the Bayside Health Clinic or here's how to schedule an appointment, they actually schedule that first appointment now. So in this past year, we scheduled 800 first appointments with our staff directly into primary care. So that really kind of assists our residents in not just enrolling, but actually seeing their medical provider. We also had ARPA projects this year, and so we are in the very final stages of finalizing the 3 new systems that we are purchasing via the ARPA funding. So we have purchased a new electronic health record, which I think is really going to be important. Right now, for the Healthcare for the Homeless program, we have 1 electronic health record, and then the Department of Health uses their electronic health record for the non-homeless population. So we've always had some issues kind of working with 2 different electronic health records. This purchase will allow us to consolidate that program, have 1 electronic health record, which will really allow us to increase efficiencies for a total health program. In addition, we have purchased a new case management system, and we're really, we've done a really great job with BTS. We've had great partnerships there. Both of these systems are modern, cloud-based, with a heavy focus on efficiencies, and there are some aspects which we're still kind of investigating, where there may be some AI, which we could really incorporate technology and maybe look at our operations and maybe look at some efficiencies within that process. The third system that we're purchasing with ARPA funding is the contracts lifecycle management. As you know, because I'm here all the time, we have over 200 contracts that we have through Human Services. And right now, those are being managed with folders and spreadsheets. And so this system will really allow us to improve that process, have a system that hosts our information, and really, again, work on those efficiencies. For Consumer Protection Division this year, we received over 1,000 complaints for investigation. We opened 963 dispute resolution cases, 225 criminal investigations, and received over $1 million in refunds, adjustments, and restitution for our residents. The last accomplishment that I wanted to share with you is the hospital-directed payment program. So as you know, we were able to initiate that program in a very, very tight timeline. So we did this in probably 2 months, where other counties have done this in 2 years. So it took a lot of coordination with the hospital systems. We met weekly, sometimes 2 times a week, because they all had to agree on the language, they all had to agree on the model, and we were able to really do that for the hospital systems, which again will impact our residents. With that program, we're able to bring in over $200 million back into those systems, which will allow those hospitals to hire qualified staff and deliver services to our residents. For our work plan, many of our items are completed or near completion, and so we're going to be in that evaluation stage. So the Care About Me, as you know, has launched. But now we really have to continue to evaluate the success of the model, look at the calls coming in, look at the service availability, and then really focus on those health of the system metrics. Again, that goal was to streamline access for residents, but also to really take a critical eye at what does access look like for residents in our community. As I noted, the next couple of weeks, we will be closing out the construction at Bayside Health Clinic and transitioning care from our temporary site back to the Bayside Health Clinic. We continue to work on the optimal data set. So currently we have 4 behavioral health funded programs that are part of the optimal data set, And just a reminder, those were those kind of 29 key performance indicators that would start rolling up all of our behavioral health funded programs with a goal of working with JWB, Central Florida Behavioral Health Network, the Sheriff's Office, and the Department of Health, where we could share those measures and then as a system really look at these investments to look at how are residents doing, how are our services being provided, and how are our providers doing with those key performance metrics. We've talked about the Ernst & Young opioid settlement funding, and really that's just a really small part, I'll say, of the engagement. Once they deliver that strategic plan and the gaps analysis, we will then be really focusing on procuring services and then implementing those large transformative programs. And lastly, after the ARPA contracts are finalized, we then have to implement those systems. So over the next 1 to 2 years, we will be migrating all of our old client health information into the new systems, working with those vendors to evaluate our processes and really trying to focus on where are efficiencies, how can we use technology to really improve the services that we deliver to our residents. All right, on to our performance measures. So just a reminder, we utilize system performance measures. So most of the services that we deliver will roll up to these performance measures. So the first measure that you will see is clients who return to homelessness within 24 months after exiting to permanent housing. The goal for the system, and that includes the entire system, so what we fund, what the municipalities fund, what HUD funds, is no more than 20% will return. And I have some updated numbers because some of these reports come in after this document's submitted. As a system, we're operating right around 27%. So we absolutely have some work to be done. And I will say the COC, the Continuum of Care, and HLA, we all have some work to be done because we're really not performing where we should be in this measure. We created a new measure this year for drug court successful completion. And so we fund various, through grants and through state funding, various components of drug fund that have specific populations. So Veterans Treatment Court, Family Dependency Drug Court, Jail Diversion Drug Court, and we didn't have a roll-up measure. So we're really trying to look at how can we look at drug court successful completion overall. And so we set this benchmark at 60%. And we're going to be working with the drug court partners as well as those individual funders to really have a roll-up measure so we can bring that back to you in later years to look at the success of drug court in total. The measure I'm probably most excited to share with you is our accidental drug-related deaths. And as you can see, we've made some improvement here. So I'm not going to say 496 is something to celebrate, but we have reduced by 100. And so that's 100 less lives that have been lost over this past year due to substance use overdose. And I'll say my hope is that that number continues to go down with the implementation of Pinellas Matters, as well as the infusion of programs and services that we will be able to do with the opioid settlement funding. As I noted, our goal this year will be to have 3 hospitals participating in the Pinellas Matters program. We have 2 so far. Largo Medical is anxiously awaiting our implementation team to be on site. And I'll just say, Lourdes and I were on the road kind of pitching this during COVID to all the hospitals, which probably, wasn't the best time, but we really were excited about this model. And now there are so many hospitals that want this model and they want it right now. So we are doing our best to keep up with the demand, but I really think we'll be able to reach our goal. And I think on a go-forward basis, we're going to try to at least do 3 hospitals per year. In addition to the drug-related accidental deaths, I just received the opioid-specific related deaths from the medical examiner's office. And for 2023, that was 387 deaths that were specific to opioids, and the year before it was 489. So again, it mirrors the overarching stats, but I really think we're making some progress there. The measure that, again, is really not going in the right direction is our suicide deaths. So you can see there's a pretty significant increase here. And I believe, Commissioner Peters, you mentioned yesterday about males accessing care. 76% of those who completed suicide last year were males. So I think we have some real opportunity when we look at our coordinated access model Part of that contract included a marketing team and a marketing approach. So I think using this data and doing something with it is really going to be important. And I think we can really focus some of the messaging towards males. You know, we need to share this data. We need to make sure that males are seeing that it's accessible, that, you know, it's confidential, it's private, it's with dignity that you can access services. So I really want to make sure that that's something that we focus on a go-forward basis. Our veteran services claims, you can see we had a little bit of a dip. Our goal each year is no less than 900, but I believe, as you recall, this was kind of our rebuilding year for veteran services. We had lost, I think, 100% of our staff to the VA due to hiring, and we worked with Workforce and Barry and made those salaries more competitive on a go-forward basis, and we were able to really attract talent. So I'm convinced that that number will continue to exceed the 900 on a go-forward basis. And as you may also know, we were able to recruit our new director, Michael Swanger, who was previously in position with Pinellas County. And I will tell you, he is so excited to be in that position. It's his dream job, and tells me every single day that it was the right decision to come back to Pinellas County. So in closing, I just want to say none of this could be done without the human services staff. You know, I work with some of the most intelligent, passionate individuals that show up each and every day to do their best and to give back to the residents. So I want to make sure that I thank them. And I also want to thank the board for allowing us to continue to be in this space, delivering social services to our residents. Thank you.
Questions? Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Karen. I appreciate all you do for our residents. You are extremely passionate about what you do, and that really comes through when you're talking. Any idea how we're doing year to date on accidental overdoses?
I don't know that I have the 2024, but I believe from the most recent email that I received from the medical examiner's office, we're on trend with continued declines.
Okay, well, that's great news. Appreciate that. And looking at on the vacancies that you have, it looks like there's 14 vacancies, and 4 of them, if I'm reading it right, it looks like they've been since 2012. Is that, just curious how you're managing with those gone, and does the budget for 25 include those 14 being filled?
So I'll let her answer the specific question, but I will tell you, OMB goes through any position that's vacant for more than a year to determine whether we can eliminate it, whether it's needed, et cetera, and stuff. And so it's eliminated unless they convince us otherwise. But I'll let her answer your specific question.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd have to look at the 4. I'm aware of 2. So we held 2 of our eligibility staff in the health program in 2023. That was part of our 1.5 million kind of pause as the Medicaid continuous enrollment was sunsetting, and we really thought that that was going to have a tremendous impact on our health program. So those that were no longer eligible for Medicaid, we assumed that they would absolutely come over to our health program for safety net services. Our enrollment has remained static, so we continue to hold those positions. And I will tell you that prior to the anti-camping law, I probably would have recommended that those 2 would have been completely eliminated. There are so many unknowns with that anti-camping law and the impact of not only the capacity at Safe Harbor, but also there could be tremendous impact on our health program. So I'll say I convinced Chris and Barry to allow me to keep those held, because if we see a surge, let's just say of 150 more individuals at Safe Harbor, we may need to deploy more resources to ensure that they can enroll in our health program. And I will say, you know, I think some of these individuals are going to have significant needs. And so I think we may need to deploy some more resources to ensure that they understand our health program and understand the services that we deliver.
And Commissioner, also, we build in a lapse savings. So we look at their vacancy rate, and so their budget is not funded at 100% of payroll. And so we look at and so that is where we may let them keep a position, like she said, in case they need to ramp back up based upon workload. But we've already held out dollars in the budget in anticipation for that vacancy being there for some period of time.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Wow. Well, it was very impressive and very thorough, so I guess I'm not surprised. Really, great job. And your department is just doing amazing things that are saving and changing lives, so thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You got a great team. You really do. Oh, Commissioner Eggers,
one
I
quick-
knew I was stalling long enough.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's just so much here. You touched on so many things that I know that, we've been working on for a while. You keep bringing things that are critically important to our residents, and I just can't thank you enough. Could you just talk briefly about our veterans group and how, I saw some numbers, but just talk a little bit about their efforts and how we're staffed and how that outreach continues to go.
Yeah, so we currently have 4 veteran services officers, 2 administrative assistants, 1 VSO2, and then the director. So right now we're located in Clearwater and St. Petersburg, and then this past year we started an outposting at the property appraiser's office to ensure that we're connecting residents. Since I would say probably within the last year, the outreach really has started to increase. So, during COVID, there was 0 outreach. We really had to start rebuilding that. And that team really is engaging in lots of different outreach in the community. So that is one of the areas I think we're going to be rebuilding. They've also tested a couple strategies. So within the last year, they were looking at transitioning from appointments to walk-ins. So we tested that for a while. We wanted to make sure that we were ready and accessible to veterans and their families who came in. And I don't know that that was the best approach because, and really this was Michael's recommendation, they really want to spend time with the veterans and their families to really answer all of their questions and give them, the best customer service that they could. And when you're constantly having walk-ins come in, your time with that veteran starts to decrease because you feel the pressure of who's waiting. So we're transitioning back to an appointment setting process to really give them the attention that they need.
Okay. And I'm assuming, flipping over to the CAM, that our folks there will be educated up in veterans calling in with issues, whether it might be this, that we can direct them to this organization, to our veterans group, or just issues related to any kind of mental health issues they may be having.
Yeah, I think we have some opportunity there. Right now, we are, when we're onboarding a provider to the CAM, we're asking about all of the different types of insurance that they may take. And if they're able to assist with veterans who have Medicaid or Medicare, they absolutely can be screened and made an appointment for. Where we have some room, I think, to go is exploring that with the VA. So would the VA want to be a partner of the CAM, where if veterans are calling in for those services, we could potentially schedule with their providers? I think that's some room that we could explore.
In our last CVIB meeting, which working with the VA, they had expressed interest in looking into that. So it'd be a good outreach. I know you have a new director.
I do.
And hopefully that person is connecting on that basis. Do you have a sense yet on that annual cost for the CAM, our CAM program?
Yes, so the annual cost is right around 1.3 million. And that is the budget that is for 1,000 calls per month. And so right now, we're at the 266, and that's since February 13th. But I'm really pleased with that pace. So we didn't want to grow too fast and disappoint residents where they're waiting on the phones too long. So right now we have above 90% live answer rate. So that's for 1,000 calls, and then we have incremental steps built in within the contract for an additional 500 calls, which I want to say is right around $350,000 per kind of bulk, 500 calls.
And the live answer rate, 90%. So how quickly do we get back to those that were not live answering?
Oh, within the 24 hours. And some, again, it's back to what does the resident want? So on the CAM, you can complete a self-referral, and maybe you don't want to be called back until Friday at 5. So you can put that there so that we're not chasing the resident. We're really asking when they want to be contacted.
Okay. Thank you. Keep up the great work.
Sure. Thank you.
Any additional questions, comments? I don't think there's enough accolades to really express how grateful I am to you guys. I kind of felt like I bullied Barry into a lot of this, but I'm glad we did it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I guess we'll go on to Convention and Visitors Bureau. Brian Loack.
So good morning, Commissioners. As you said, Brian Loack, President and CEO of Visit St. Pete Clearwater, is here, as well as Terry Tuxhorn, Vice President of Administrative Services. Once again, I'm getting the title slightly wrong. My apologies. Next to me is Jim Abernathy. Jim will be presenting once again to you, this time on CVB.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jim Abernathy. I'm with the Office of Management and Budget. I'm here to present the FY25 budget request for the Convention and Visitors Bureau. The department's total FY25 budget is $332.9 million, which includes $264.7 million in reserves. As part of the FY25 budget development process, the department was asked to find efficiencies, which can be found in more detail on page 7 of the packet. Now, if you turn to page 2 of the packet, the department's FY25 budget request increases $15 million, excluding reserves, to $68.2 million. Personnel services decreased $87,000 due to vacant positions being filled below budget. We've also included a 3% salary adjustment and FRS increases. The department's FTE remains at 50 in FY25. Operating expenditures increased $6.4 million to $42.2 million. Included in this figure are the advertising contracts of $27.9 million. The increase is mainly due to the department's decision package to increase advertising budget by $6 million. The details of this decision package can be found on page 12 of the packet. A second decision package is for consulting services related to the new Tampa Bay Rays Stadium project for $350,000. The FY25 budget request also includes continued funding to Creative Pinellas for $861,150 of TDT funds. Additional funding for Creative Pinellas is included in the FY25 request in the general fund for $156,000 and the Transportation Trust Fund for $36,000. Another piece of CVB's FY25 budget request is the board's commitment to provide funding for beach nourishment projects. This budget continues dedicating half of the 3% to TDT to future beach projects. FY25's funding for beach nourishment is $8.8 million. In addition to the beach nourishment projects, CVB also provides funding for tourism-related capital projects around the county. The FY25 budget request includes $350,000 for security improvements at the Florida Holocaust Museum in St. Petersburg, which is a project that has been in previous budgets, but due to supply issues and other issues, it's been pushed to consecutive budgets. The total will still be $350,000. Also included is the Florida Holocaust Museum in St. Pete, is $10 million for the Dali Museum. The Dali Museum project is expected to be brought to the board for approval in July. The CVB is 100% funded by the Tourist Development Tax Fund, which is almost entirely supported by the Tourist Development Tax, also known as the bed tax. FY25 TDT revenue is $93.5 million, with total revenue of $98.9 million. Total reserves in FY25 are $264.7 million, which is split $125.3 million dedicated to operating expenditures such as advertising, and $139.4 million dedicated to potential capital projects. On page 16 of the packet is the forecast for current and potential future TDT-funded capital projects. Not all of the projects included in the capital projects forecast have been approved by the BCC, but this information matches what was presented at the joint BCC-TDC meeting in May. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brian Lowak to go over the CVB's accomplishments and work plans.
Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you to you all. Brian Lowak, President and CEO of Visit St. Pete Clearwater, and I'm joined with Terry Tuxhorn, our Vice President of Finance and Administration today. And just as a note, she's the brains of the operation. So she's been extremely helpful, and this was my first budget that I went through as a department director, and her historical knowledge, and every time I had a question or why are we doing this, why are we doing that, Terry knew the answer. So I really want to give her the credit that she deserves that went into the budget. As far as accomplishments and work plan, first and foremost, we filled vacant positions within the organization. And last year at this meeting, it was a 27% vacancy rate for positions in the department. Today, there's 2 vacancies in the organization, one of which we're about to start interviews for an administrative support position. And the second position, we are evaluating how we're going to utilize that moving forward. In addition to those, I do want to highlight that those 4 of the key positions were our executive leadership team: Chief Marketing Officer, Vice President, Finance and Administration, Vice President, Community Engagement, Vice President of Business Development. All 4 of those were vacant. All 4 of those are full today. We also completed our strategic plan. This was an initiative that was underway, began back in 2021, and a lot of the groundwork had been laid. The surveys, data collection, had been compiled. We brought it in for a landing this past year. We created a new vision, mission, pillars for success, and over 60 KPIs for the organization, both organization-wide as well as our 3 different divisions: business development, marketing, and community engagement. We launched From Visitors with Love campaign, and hopefully that's not a new campaign to anyone in this room or anyone listening to this meeting. This is a in-market campaign geared towards residents to highlight the value of tourism. And this campaign has been awesome from us as an organization. We love doing it, but it's been well received by our residents and businesses. In fact, it's been nominated for multiple industry awards, and I have presented at it on that campaign at conferences. And next month over in Tampa at Destinations International, I'll be presenting on the From Visitors with Love campaign as well. We also implemented a new concept we have, and we do these quarterly, Coffee with the CEO, where we put out the message in our industry update, and anyone in the industry, residents, but industry folks as well, can sign up, and they come, and we have coffee and donuts on a Friday morning, and we talk about anything under the sun. We provide an update about what we're going on, and we value the feedback that we get from the folks who attend that. In addition to doing those quarterly, we also implemented the destination training sessions, and we have these quarterly, and it's where our brand activations team actually brings in mainly frontline employees, but it's open to residents as well as long as you sign up, and we bring them in and we provide updates on what's going on in the destination and educate them on the destination, because we know here in Pinellas County, not only do we have a staff of 50 at Visit St. Pete Clearwater, but we've got 1 million potential brand ambassadors, and we want to make sure we're arming them with the tools and resources to go out and spread our message. This year was the return of the besties. I know some of you here in this room had the opportunity to attend, but for those that don't know of the besties, these are the best of the industry in St. Pete Clearwater, everything from best grouper sandwich to best sunset to best dog beach, 35 categories. This year we had over 74,000 votes cast for the besties. So we had attendance of over 400 up at Innisbrook. We just recently had it, and it was very well received by the industry, and our staff were excited. The besties aren't going anywhere. In addition to that, you have some of the stats. Last year was a record-setting year for Pinellas County tourism. A record collection of $98.1 million in TDT. That came from 15.8 million visitors. That equated to over 6 million hotel room nights. Accommodation revenue $1.6 billion, $6.5 billion in direct spend, and almost $11 billion in total economic impact. We want to highlight the $421 million in total taxes contributed from tourism, and how we get to that number of 421 million is through the $98 million in bed tax collection, the sales tax. We like to remind folks that visitors pay about a third of the penny for Pinellas, but also property taxes that are generated from those tourism businesses. That's what happened last year. Moving on to what's currently happening and what's on the horizon for the coming year. We recently opened up the capital projects funding cycle for the first time in 6 years, and that application cycle closed on May 31st. We got a very healthy application pool for good projects. In addition to that, we also recently had the elite event funding application cycle close. We had over 51 applicants there requesting upwards of $2.9 million. Thanks to some of the changes that you all recently approved to the elite event guidelines, we're going to be administratively handling many of those smaller events, and then we'll be bringing to you the true elite events here in the months ahead. Same goes for the capital funding projects. We're also going to be evaluating all of our funding and incentive programs. We have many funding and incentive programs, everything from film incentive program to a hotel group business incentive for room nights, a sports incentive, chamber funding. You all upped last year in our budget from $500,000 to $600,000 for Chamber of Commerce support, and there's over 13 chambers in our program, and we provide those dollars to market Visit St. Pete Clearwater, but also man the visitor centers that they have. We have no visitor centers. The chambers do have visitor centers up and down Pinellas County, and that's what those dollars go towards. We actually just had our chamber funding, our chamber CEO summit at Collaborative Labs last Friday, where we met with our chambers to make sure, take a look at the program as it exists today, how we can better work with them to make sure we're advancing our goals. We also, earlier this year, created the marketing committee, and this is made up of marketing professionals from our partner organizations throughout the county. And the intent here is to get their perspective, their expertise, and make sure we're all in alignment with our messaging. We're in the process of putting together a sales committee, similar, but made up of the sales professionals. So the sales and market, the directors of sales at our specifically meetings properties throughout the destination, but as well as the leisure sales teams from the hotels to make sure that they're coordinating with our team in our messages. Today, we've got a marketing summit going on with all of our agencies. We're taking a fresh perspective at everything we do, making sure that we have a marketing strategy that's holistic and meets our needs and positions us well moving into the future. And then I just want to highlight that really everything that we do, there's 3 phases to the stool, and we have to be successful at all of them in order to be successful as a destination. So that's marketing, which most people think of. It's also business development and sales, but perhaps most importantly, it's community engagement. So thanks to the support of this board, we now are fully staffed. We have the resources we need to do our job. And we've never been more bullish on Visit St. Pete Clearwater as an organization or the destination. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Any questions for Brian? Lettville, Commissioner Lettville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, and congratulations. You are now officially one of the smartest people in the room. I really like the 50-50 split. One of the things, though, that I have a question about is the $350,000 reimbursement to the city of St. Pete. Are there other reimbursements that we are doing to the city on the RAISE project?
No, this is specifically for the Inner Circle Sports contract. And so that's specifically to our consultant that's helping us negotiate that. So we hired them jointly.
Okay, so that's our consultant as well?
Correct. So we hired them, it was through a competitive selection process, and we jointly hired them to where we had one firm representing us.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But I would like to speak to the 50/50s. We had an internal, that, I really believe that it requires further discussion at the TDC with a recommendation coming to you before we go to that 50/50. So I think internally we had that, I mean, I do support that, I presented that, but I think that the TDC needs to be bought in before we make that change as a recommendation that comes to you all. Ultimately, it's your decision, but I wouldn't, I think it's very, very important we build the partnership and we continue to show that we're not diverting tourism marketing efforts by doing that split, changing that split.
Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of comments and then a question. The community engagement, I think, has just been so successful as I'm out and about talking to folks. And Kylie Diaz, who is new for doing that, she's been on some of the same Rotary Club circuit that I've been on, and she does a great job representing the organization, and Oliver does a great job. So I think so many times I've heard, we just want to be talked to. You know, the hoteliers and business owners, we just want to be talked to. And so that's really critical. And then the coffee with the CEO, giving them that opportunity is really, really good. But the destination training part, because I'll never forget, I was at a diner on the beach one morning having breakfast, and the couple was sitting and talking to the waiter and asked, it was going to be a rainy day, what else can we do? And he said, well, there's a movie theater in Seminole you can go to. And that was his only recommendation. And it was like, holy smokes, we need to do a better job of educating these folks about all the opportunities of great things. So I think those are all really, really good. My question is, the tourist development plan, we're supposed to review that every 5 years, and what is our timetable for when we're going to do that again?
So our timetable is, as you'll recall, at the joint meeting that we recently had, that was a initial discussion about reviewing it. And, you know, talking to the county attorney's office, the definition of review, we review it all the time. But it's been about 4.5 years since a proposed change has been brought forward. And at that time, I don't believe the changes were acted on. So the long answer is now we're reviewing it. We've proposed from Visit St. Pete Clearwater some staff recommendations of some like immediate changes that I think the TDC 100% supports. And in my discussions and what I heard at the joint meeting, I think this board supports. So we're going to be bringing forward some changes on that.
Yeah, I guess our definition of review is a little different in my mind than what that was. I would like us to have, at some point, could be a work session or whatever, a more formal discussion of that plan, because I still think that there's opportunities for us to open up that plan a little bit. Things that are allowed in statute for expenditure of the TDT that we don't have in our plan, that wouldn't blow up the budget, wouldn't change, but would give us opportunity to fund some of our own county facilities that serve our tourists, and that would free up our county money for other things. So at some point, Barry, I'd like to have that as a real conversation, and I'll be bringing forth, and I'll share with you some ideas that I have on it, and if there's consensus, we can move forward. If there's not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Eggers.
I'll be brief. I would just add if John could see you now, right? I always think about when I first met you, when you were working for John in his office. Great to see the team pull together this past year and getting fully staffed. I think that was huge. I couldn't believe that we had 3 or 4 key positions not staffed. So thank you, and thank you for your assistance this past year. Clearly important. I agree with Commissioner Justice on the plan update. I'd like to see that brought back. And just a quick question on the 5-year forecast for the capital reserves, excluding raise. They're not in the equation at that moment. But what are you estimating that reserve level to be? It's at $139 million in the coming budget. What are you seeing?
Yeah, in FY30, including the raise, would be $101 million in capital reserves. We had a plug number that we used at the joint meeting of about $20.5 million per year for raise cost. And the figure that we presented included that being paid. So if we don't include the raise, then we're probably over $200 million in capital reserves. If
And
we
you
don't,
also have operating reserve dollars also.
correct. The operating is growing as well. So the operating would be close to the same amount at the current 60-40
You say
split.
in fiscal year 30?
Yeah, in fiscal year 30, including the raise, including $20 million annual payments for the raise, starting in FY '26, we would be at $101 million in capital reserves only.
And without them, it's up to about 200 million
Correct.
in fiscal year 31.
Correct.
Okay. I'm just trying to get a sense of where we
Yeah,
are.
and that includes-
Does that include the 50/50? Or
No,
is
yes, that's at the 50-50 level.
Okay.
Which was presented at the joint meeting.
And so
But
you understand that draw, commissioners. So by going to the 50/50, what that does is it puts more money into the capital reserve rather than the operating reserve, which they're both dollars that can be used. But by doing that, there's no year in which, if we did nourishment on our own, we go into a negative cycle. And that's just off of our capital reserve, and you still have the operating reserve. And that was the reason we were playing with the different numbers. Now, you could do a different way of doing that, which is when you come up to a nourishment cycle, you simply move money from the operating reserve down to capital. It's another way of doing that, but each year you're not spending at the 60% under the operating side, so our thought was, why keep it at that? But again, I think that requires more discussion with TDC.
I understand what you're saying. I still like the idea of having it separate because I think it does a couple things. It involves the TDT and their recommendations and the idea of why it was split originally, and then that kind of change in the discussion we're talking about going from 60-40 to 50-50. But you're right. We could, if we needed those funds, we can access them.
Yes.
But I don't, yeah, again, I just think this is, I like the idea of having the plan looked at again from both perspectives. But anyway, that's all I had. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also agree with Commissioner Justice. I'd like to take a look at what options we have further with those dollars. And Brian, congratulations on your master's, and certainly appreciate the renewed enthusiasm and direction that you brought to Visit St. Pete Clearwater. So well done, and keep it up. So the projected bed tax revenue for 25 is going down. Room nights have gone up 100,000, but it's gone down because, if I'm reading here correctly, we only budget at 95%. Is that historically the way we've done?
Correct.
We've always done that?
Correct,
Okay.
that's the
Got it.
state statute.
And what are your thoughts, or what are we projecting in terms of the average room night in that? Because demand's been a little soft compared to previous years. So has that average room night, has that gone up, stayed the same, gone down?
So I can tell you this year, we were we're now 7 months into the fiscal year. We just last week got the April numbers back in TDT collection, and we are, from a bed tax collection, we are down 1.3% year over year of where we were last year at this point in time. Occupancy is slightly down. However, ADR has held strong, and the supply has continued to increase. So demand's pretty stable, but the supply's increased. So when you look at it from that perspective, one thing's got to equate to it. It's that the ADR has remained consistent or elevated at certain times of the year.
Okay. And supply is going to continue to increase as we
So yeah, supply has increased this year at a higher level than demand, and over the next 5 years, there's 3,600 new rooms coming online, and that doesn't even consider projects that have been approved conceptually that won't come online in that time. So the supply is going to continue to do nothing but increase.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Any additional questions, comments? No? Okay. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it. All your hard work. You've done a great job. And next, we're bringing up the airport. We'll have Tom.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. We have John Wagoner here again, returning for the last department of the day. And we have James Lewis also going to be presenting on the capital budget. Remember, this is an enterprise fund. And I'm stalling for just a little more time while everybody gets set. Tom Jewsbury, Director, and Yvette Ailey, Deputy Director for Finance and Administration. Good partners all around. And John, are you ready?
I am. Good morning again, Commissioners. John Wagoner, Office of Management and Budget, Operating Analyst for Airport. Just to review the presentation flow, I will present the operating budget. James Lewis will present the capital budget. And Airport Executive Director Tom Jewsbury will conclude the presentation. So before we get to the numbers, I do want to share a personal perspective from my analysis. I struggled to start writing this part of the presentation. That is, until I recognized the creativity, the focused teamwork, and the holistic approach it took to accomplish efficiencies and cost savings, and also the diverse way in the way the airport department accomplished them. So I'm going to kick into the overview. In FY25, flexible staff assignments saved $275,000 in lap savings, and reprioritization of resources and functions, they were able to save $660,000. In FY24, alternative funding and alternative training sites allowed them to save $73,000. And in FY23, efforts were centered on supply chain and partnerships, saving $85,000. And that really just, I have to give them kudos. It really stood out, just the creative and really getting into the budget deep to get these savings. So that's just my personal perspective. And thank you for letting me share that. The airport, FY25 airport budget story is anchored in two concepts: security, and that's both physical and fiscal, and strategy. So to start, the Transportation Security Administration screening, which is the federal component of airport security, has been affected in two ways. Department of Homeland Security funding cuts eliminated $120,000 in the law enforcement reimbursement program revenue, and unfunded mandates for increased aviation worker screening cost $480,000 in FY25. That's a $480,000 increase, and we'll discuss that in the decision package section. Moving on, sheriff deputy costs, which is the local component of airport security, are dependent upon Pinellas County Sheriff Office Service Agreement charges, and those are currently being negotiated. Reserves can be used as fiscal security for changing economic times, but they can also be used as a strategic tool for achieving county goals. In the middle of page 2 of your document, the budget drivers for FY25, actually the budget excluding reserves decreased $3 million. Revenues increased $3.4 million, and that was primarily due to the American Recovery Plan at $735,000. Interest was $2.1 million, but those were offset by a reduction in concessions revenue by $394,000. Personnel services increased $230,000, and that includes a 3% salary adjustment on the midpoint for all employees and Florida retirement system increases. And the department has 65 FTE in FY25. Operating expenses increased $1.6 million. Those are driven by contract service costs increasing $911,000. Professional services increase of $232,000, and utility services increases of $205,000. At the top of page 3, you'll find decision package. packages. The airfield sweeper replacement at $315,000, the first one. The existing sweeper is beyond its useful life, and the replacement model, unlike the current sweeper, does not require a commercial driver license to operate. And that provides an added benefit of improved efficiency through work assignment optimization, as well as, well, actually, that was a savings that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. Previously, I mentioned the airport aviation worker screening mandate costing $480,000. This occurred in early 2023. The TSA issued an unfunded mandate requiring airport worker screening similar to passenger screening. Additional staff and equipment are needed to screen employees in concessions, maintenance, ticketing, construction, and other vital support roles. The compliance deadline for this mandate is September 30th, 2024. The final decision package for batwing mowers costing $75,000. One of these mowers replaces equipment at the end of its service life, and the second improves operating efficiency. It has redundancy, and the airport has to maintain grass at a certain height to maintain its FAA passenger airport certification standards. So that is the operating portion of the airport budget. I'd like to turn it to James Lewis for the capital improvement plan.
Thank you, John. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So here at the bottom of page 3, we have the capital improvement plan report for airport. The report's actually entirely contained to the bottom of page 3. So we'll start with the FY25 through 36-year capital plan is increasing by $9.6 million over the FY24 through 29 plan. That's largely driven by the cost increases in the, well, not cost increases, but the beginning of the airport terminal improvements project. Looking at FY25, we do actually see a decrease, and I want to give you an update here from the time that we put this document together to essentially yesterday. We made some adjustments to the Airco taxiway project budget, so it's moving out a little bit. There's been some delays with floodplain issues. The decrease for FY25 is going to be $11.6 million, so that's bringing the FY25 request to $23.1 million. That is about $8.7 million above the expenditure average for the last 6 years. So that is a big ramp up in capital projects, about 50% more than they've done on average over the last 6 years. And again, that's largely driven by the terminal improvements project beginning design and going into design through FY25. Now, airport utilizes multiple funding sources. They have one fund, the Airport Revenue and Operating Fund, but for the capital improvements, they have multiple funding sources. Over the 6-year plan and in the FY25 plan, the general trend that we're seeing from last year and this year is an increase in grant funding. And this year, there's actually a new funding source for capital improvements, the customer facility charges. So not a new funding source, but newly being applied to a capital project, and that's collected by the rental car companies and then transferred to the airport for their use. At the same time, we're seeing a decrease in the airport funding and in the passenger facility charges, which are similar. They're collected by the airlines when you purchase an airline ticket, and the airport applies to the FAA for use of them on specific uses. The reason you're seeing that decrease is because of that application process, and it kind of has to be scheduled out as they apply on an annual basis. There at the bottom is the increased funding requests. Again, these are projects that are increasing by $250,000 and 15%. This year, the airport has one increased funding request, and that is for the multi-level parking garage project. At the beginning of this, I believe I said that the increase over the 6 years was driven by the terminal improvements project, and I misspoke. It's actually driven by this project, the multi-level parking garage project. So we've updated this project pretty much every year when we come to you. There's new estimates on the cost of this structure. That's still very preliminary. The airport's looking at what's been done at similar size airports around the country, what they've paid for parking garage structures, and have updated their estimates accordingly. They've also increased the scope of the project. So originally was planned for 1,000 spaces or 1,000 parking stalls. They've increased that to 1,300 to just for demand, and they've increased the cost per stall from $30,000 to $35,000. In our analysis, the airport and OMB, we both looked at similar sized airports, and for example, the airport in Boise, Idaho, built a parking garage at $33,000 per stall. In Albany, they did it for $43,000 per stall, and in Knoxville, they did it for $51,000 per stall. So still very preliminary numbers. We still need to go through the design process and get estimates and go through the bidding process. Likely to change again, but that's where we're sitting this year. I will briefly give you an update on the terminal improvements project. So you, the board, approved the design consultants contract on May 21st. The same meeting you recognized revenue of $6 million in an FAA federal grant through our budget amendment. So that project is beginning design. It'll be continue moving through design in FY25. Latest schedule update we got from the engineer in the airport was that the construction manager at risk is expected to be selected sometime in the next fiscal year, and the guaranteed maximum price, should be following in FY26 as well. There was some slowdown earlier in negotiations on the RFP, so we've kind of moved that schedule out just a little bit. In the FY25 through 36 year plan, the budget, the allocation for that project is $103 million. That's pretty well distributed among the kind of three funding sources: the airport, the county, state, and federal. So you have $31.6 million in airport funds, you have $6 million in federal grants from the FAA, $1.5 million in state grants from FDOT, and then we have another $29.4 million in what we're calling future grants, for state grants from the FDOT. So those are grants that we expect to receive but have not yet received and secured, and an additional $34.6 in future federal grants from the FAA. Again, fully expect to receive those grants, but they have not been secured at this point. In FY25, the terminal improvement project will be $9.6 million. That concludes the capital report. John, if you have nothing else, I'll turn it over to Director Tom Jewsbury.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. It's always great to see you. Tom Jewsbury, Executive Director of the St. Pete Clearwater International Airport. And with me I have Vet Ailey, my number 2 here, who's Deputy Director of Admin and Finance. So I get to do the good stuff, talk about the accomplishments. We're very fortunate we continue to see positive growth over FY22. When you look at FY23, we saw about a 2% increase, which is good, moderate growth. If you take a look at over the past 10 years, it's almost been 200%. So we're doing a lot trying to stay ahead of the game, as was talked about during the capital improvement program with the construction of the terminal and the expansion of the terminal, as well as a new parking garage. Over the past year, we've seen an addition of 3 new destinations, domestic destinations. So we now serve over 64 nonstop destinations, which is amazing for our size of airport. We also implemented a new concession program 3 years ago that you're aware of. We had a new concessionaire come in. We had Mazzaro's, Three Daughters, District Hub, Dunkin' Donuts. That's really impacted our concession revenue as much as almost 10% that we saw over FY23. So we're continuing to look to expand that concession opportunity, especially with the expansion of the terminal building. As it relates to the terminal building, again, you're aware that we're moving forward with over $100 million terminal expansion. We've been very active over the past 5 years to go ahead and secure federal and state funding for that. There was competitive grant funding available this year under the FAA, under the BILL program, specifically called the Airport Terminal Program. We worked with Harry Glenn and others to try to secure that funding. Again, it's competitive. There were about 100 out of 500 commercial service airports that received that. So we secured $6 million of that federal funding to put towards the terminal. We're going to go back this year and compete again for additional funding to help offset the cost that we have taking out of our reserves. With your support last year, you supported us in requesting an appropriations grant for infrastructure improvements to Airco, so we can go ahead and try to move forward in developing that property. Received $2.5 million in grants, and again, we look to move forward this year and trying to secure future appropriation grants, not only for Airco, but more so for the parking garage, because the parking garage is not eligible for FAA funding. So again, we continue to grow. We work lean and mean. As said before, we've got 65 employees. That's a 24/7 operations department, maintenance department, ARF department, fire department. So we're proud of what we're bringing forward in the way of the budget, and we continue to, yes, we have healthy reserves, but that's because the intent is to use that for terminal development, so we can try to, at least for that project, avoid any type of bonding or loans. So with that said, we continue to appreciate all your support and open it up for questions.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Commissioner Eggers.
Thank you for the update. The terminal improvement project is going to be implemented over a period of time. When do you see it being finished? I mean,
yeah,
phases,
we,
I know.
like was said before, we just brought the design firm on board. We are also, it's going to be a construction management at risk project,
Right.
meaning that we bring the contractor on board early. That's out on the streets now. So we'll start actual construction a year from now is when we'll move forward. And the project is about, it's going to be a 3-year project.
And those are the list of dollars that you laid out, or you laid out about the accumulating 100 million for that.
Funding sources,
For
correct.
those funding
Yes.
sources, okay. So I have to ask, because it's the annual meeting, and you'll get to see you, and that's about the quiet time increase, the trend on the quiet time increase in scheduled flights. Do you see that continuing to happen? Do you see this expansion as helping us bring more of them into the light of day, or do you see the increase going to that quiet time?
The expansion itself, no, is not going to have a direct impact on that. It could. In recent meetings with Allegiant, they want to grow. They want to be more of an impact to the community. As much as in recent discussions, even December, they're looking at a 30% growth. So it will have an impact. Will the terminal expansion project sort of push that ahead? I can't say that for sure.
When I'm talking about pushing it ahead, I'm talking about providing more opportunities for daylight traffic.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Taking that pressure away from late night. You know, the unexpected or unscheduled flights are just that. We can't control those.
Correct.
But have you seen an increase in that scheduled time, you know, that after-hour time frame? Have you seen an increase?
You know, it's all seasonal. They're good partners with us, as you know. I mean, they actually fly in from their headquarters from Vegas for noise abatement task force meetings and try to work with us to minimize it. I recently when we were talking about building the new schedule, I said, listen, and they said, we know, we're going to try to avoid at all costs as far as scheduling flights outside that voluntary quiet window.
When do you see those flights being scheduled? The first hour, like 11 to 12? Or are you seeing them throughout the night?
It's usually just, if it does go outside that quiet window, 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay, so 11 o'clock is the shut-off time, right?
That's what we strive for.
Yeah.
Again, we can't shut it off, but we work with the airlines to say, hey, listen, you know, as being a partner of our community, when you can try to avoid those flights during that time.
No, I appreciate the efforts. I mean, I think it's important that we make those efforts, or just get rid of a time period called quiet time if we're not making the efforts to
but we-
encourage our partners. And I think we do.
We do.
Yeah, so I appreciate those
Yeah,
efforts.
and give props, as you know, to Mark Sprague does a lot, and it's a lot of constant communication, especially with Allegiant, to try to avoid that. So it's not as if we just say, this is
Good.
the window and look the
I
other
got
way.
you. All right, thank you, appreciate it. That's all I had, thank you, Madam.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good to see you, Tom. Is there any update on that property to the west of the airport where the Turtle Club was? I know at one point we had a contract with Marine Max to, so any news on that?
Yeah, what the news is, we're providing a temporary use for the St. Pete Auto Auction to utilize that for parking, to at least generate revenue in the temporary time. Unfortunately, Marine Max pulled out of that because it was going to be approximately $9 million in just infrastructure for the property due to floodplain issues. We're seeing that all over the county. We are going to be going back out on the streets with an RFP to try to go ahead and look at future development.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
So currently, Allegiant is your major carrier, correct?
Correct.
Are we still looking at trying to bring other airlines in? Or no?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
one of our top priorities. In fact, our Director of Air Surface Development, just as of a couple of weeks ago, had meetings with 9 different carriers. So that is, that's something that's certainly active, and we're looking at not only opportunities to expand service that Allegiant's supplying, but 100% bringing in new carriers.
So are Frontier and Breeze on your list?
Absolutely, we've had recent discussions.
Just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a question, but to Commissioner Long's point, this was always a question we asked every year about other airlines, and Tom took an hour with staff, and we sat down, and he went through the whole process of what was involved in attracting another airline. And if he's willing to spend that time with you, any of the commissioners, I think it was really educational. It helped me understand the process, because we would have all this frustration, why aren't we getting other airlines more, and there seemed to be opportunities, but to walk through that whole process was really an education and well worth the time. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just have a comment,
Sure,
if I
Commissioner
may.
Long.
While I'm very sensitive to the issue of the noise for the planes landing and taking off, the one thing I know from all the planes I've been on, once that plane is in the air, taking off is optional, but landing is not. And so, depending on what happens in other airports where that plane may be leaving from, they can't always control when they leave, and sometimes they're on schedule and sometimes they're not. But getting back and landing safely is really critical. So, it doesn't help that we are in an area of the world where when you're flying, you're going through 7 different airspaces that are constantly communicating with the different towers. It's a huge, big deal. If you've ever gone up in the sheriff's helicopter, it's fascinating to listen to all of the pilots and the towers try to navigate all that airspace. So, while I understand it produces noise, there's not too much that can be done about that.
Yeah. And as you know, we don't control the airspace, but we do everything in our power to work with the FAA and the airlines to try to implement noise abatement procedures to minimize the disruption to our community.
Okay, any additional comments? I don't see any. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Keep doing the great work.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bud.
Okay, Barry, do you have
Thanks,
any
guys.
other comments?
Okay, Commissioners, that's all for today. We will come back tomorrow. Please.
voice from beyond. As I try to pull up Chris's schedule here. So that's all for today. Tomorrow we have the Health Department, Medical Examiner, Economic Development, Safety and Emergency Services, and the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, anyone else have anything else to add? Commissioner Justice.
So we'll be here after lunch tomorrow, I'm assuming?
At this point, Della has not ordered lunch. We thought we would be done by noon for every budget. If by chance it looks like we're running late, she said she would order pizza. So at this point, we're projected to be around the same time as today. But we could be wrong. It just depends on how many questions and how much discussion. Okay. And then Commissioner Justice.
Thank you. Just FYI, the governor is getting ready for his press conference to announce the budget and the veto list. So we'll see how much he's still mad at Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, I heard it's a ton.
I would expect a lot of vetoes. So hopefully Pinellas County will be, spared the veto pen. Okay, nothing else for the good, then we'll have this meeting adjourned. Thank you.